Hello, everybody. Dr. Rick Wallace here, dropping in on you. I wanted to do this live, but I wanted to share this clip of Bryce Gowdy's mother explaining what led up to this young man's suicide. And then I want to talk to you briefly about how we're failing our people by being focused on things that don't have substance. And we are not listening for the cries of help. We are so disconnected as a people. For those who don't know, Bryce Gowdy is a young man who literally had signed his letter of intent to play football for Georgia Tech. I believe he's out of Florida. And he was going to play for Georgia Tech, but his parents and his family, his mother and his siblings were going through a really rough patch. They were homeless and he was struggling with some things. And I'm going to talk to you about that after you listen to this clip. So listen to the clip and just take it. I'm going to tell you now, it's emotional. It's going to pull at you. But I think it's necessary for me to get the message home of how important it is for us to reconnect. We lack an affinity for one another. We lack empathy for one another. It's too easy for us to see one another struggle and be solely and intentfully only fixed on ourselves. Individualism is destroying us. So go ahead and take a look at this video clip, and I'm going to check back in and weigh in on it after you see it. Okay, hey, I'm back. Now, it's easy to get caught up in the emotional intensity of this video. You have to understand, this lady is literally talking hours or maybe even minutes after she's identified the body of her son, who felt there was no way out. And the only solution that he could come up with was to take his own life in one of the most horrific ways that you can possibly imagine. But what I want you to do is pay attention to the things that led up to this. What she's explaining about his behavior is, with what little information I have, is explaining the behavior of someone who is experiencing a psychotic break. A psychotic break is simply a point in time when your ability to mentally process a stressful event reaches its edge and you no longer can make sense of it. And there's a break from reality, a break from what you would consider normality. And it normally ends up with some sort of negative behavior. And it can happen in a number of ways. Some people have a psychotic break, hurt people. Some people have a psychotic break, hurt themselves. Some people have a psychotic break and totally divorced from reality long term. What gets me about this is that it came to this. There's a point where she says, I've been asking for help for months. Now, I don't know her story. I don't know what she's been through. I'm not championing her decision-making. I'm not championing her work ethic. I don't know all of that. I know that she mentioned she had a job and she was trying to work. But what I want to talk about is, she is not an anomaly. She is not someone who is an abstract representation of something that doesn't happen often. She is what is becoming more common. She falls in the same line of Diana Elliott, someone else that I stood up and I spoke for when a lot of people were trying to drag her because of what happened with her son. My thing is, we live in a world that purposefully marginalizes us in the area of finance, economics, and resources. It leaves us to fend for ourselves while purposely pushing us closer and closer to the edge of extinction. and we are not responding to it. We are literally sitting back, and all we see is where we're at. We see our high 5-figure, low 6-figure income. We see our home that we've purchased. We see our car we've purchased. We see the mobility that we believe we have in a society that's slowly squeezing the life out of us, but we don't see it because we haven't been trained to see collectively. We see individually. We see where we're at. It doesn't bother us until it's us. They've been shooting us dead in the street for years, but I don't get calls about that until it's that person, and then they're on my phone or they're emailing or reaching out then. But it's been an issue for decades. It's been a serious issue for the last 15 years or more. And it's not a problem until it lands on your doorstep. Same thing with Diana Elliott. There was a cry for help, but nobody was listening. And I'm not here to point fingers at specific people, but there are some questions that pop up when I watch that. I'm not going to bring them out because, again, I'm not here to point the finger or blaming anybody. This is not what we need to do right now. But we need to answer some questions. How can a person, be in that situation and there's nobody? How can a young man be forced to face that type of pressure at that age and try to be put in a situation where he has to figure it out? You can hear her talking about how much of a negative force the energy he was emitting, because he had reached a point where it simply did not make sense. And then there's a point in the beginning when she's talking about he had become disillusioned. In other words, he was seeing the world in its darkest state. He was seeing the world in its darkest identity. He was disillusioned. The idea of morality, the idea of positivity, the idea of prosperity, all the things that are being sold in large sums in this country. He saw the other side of it. He saw that it was more people suffering than it was living prosperity. It was more people in poverty than it is living in prosperity. It was a situation that he was trying to come to grips with, but there was no answer for him. And when he needed an answer, we failed him. And I say we, and I know most of us didn't have a clue, but I can guarantee you it's somebody in your periphery, somebody in your community, somebody in your family that's going through something right now that needs your intervention. And your intervention isn't, I will pray for you. I'm keeping you lifted. God will make a way. And this isn't taking a shot at God. This is taking a shot at the fact that God designed us to be actively engaged in making change come about, actively engaged in bringing about better situations for ourselves, our family, our loved ones, and the community we reside in. A responsibility to stand up and meet the challenges head on. We are failing because we're so consumed with self that we can't see the suffering of our brothers and sisters. I'm not a person who has lived a perfect life. I've made some poor choices. I've made some poor decisions. And so I am able to look at people and see them outside of the poor decision making. I'm not saying she's made poor decisions. I don't know her story. I know she needs help. And what we're going to do is we're going to do the best we can to help her from where we're at. And this is so long and and I refuse to say too little too late, because she's still alive and she still has children. But we could have did a lot better if we would have been, as a collective, responsive. In other words, I didn't know her, but somebody did. And if we can get to a point where we're collective, where somebody knows somebody that knows somebody, that's the thing. Our opposition has that. Every other group I can think about has that, where someone sees someone going through something, say, hold on a second, I can't fix it for you, but I know somebody, or I know somebody who knows somebody. And it's always an attachment to a resource. No matter how many people you got to go through before you're actually at the resource, there's a link to the resource. We don't have this connectivity that's inherent within our community where that is a link to the resource. I can't imagine the amount of pressure of this young man trying to make sense of a life that's completely unraveling before him. You know, he's probably been told about God a lot, but he's trying to come to grips with how God could allow his mom to go through what she's going through, how God could allow him to be disconnected from his father in whatever way is going on. Because, you know, you're here and homeless and you're on the phone with your father. That's some questions. She mentions calling her brother. Again, I don't want to throw blame because I don't know the story. But I know that there's got to be a way that we're helping the people who need help in our community. We have to understand that we cannot depend upon a system that is designed to destroy us to be the saving grace for our people when we are at wit's end. We can't sit around and be expecting the enemy to save us. That's our job. It's our job to rise up and meet the needs of our people. We've got to do this collectively. We've got to do this in an organized manner. We've got to stand up. We're so busy blowing our horns and tooting our horns and poking our chests out about what we're doing. And then we've got this happening. We're failing. I don't think it's anybody right now that can sit up and champion and say, hey, man, I'm doing my thing and I got this thing on lock. Because that should not have happened. That should not have happened. It can't happen on our watch. This cannot continuously be. Well, we've got our people throwing up their hands, and it's happening far more frequently than it has happened at any other time in the past. The numbers are bearing it out that suicide among blacks is on the rise. Suicide among black kids from the age of 5 to 11 is the highest among any kids in that group. And that's never happened before. We've never led any demographic in suicide, but 5 to 11, we lead it now. And then teenagers is on an upswing. What are we allowing to happen that our babies are so defeated that they can't see anything worth living for? There's so much that we need to be able to do that we're not doing. And we could talk about it all day, and that's not why I'm here. I'm here to ring your bell, to wake you up, to say, hey, we need to do something. I'm going to do whatever I can. I'm working with a couple of partners down the East Coast to determine what it is for my level of expertise and what we have in way of resources to be a resource to the family there. And my partner is definitely going to be doing what she can do from her end. And she's a business partner, but we are working together to deal with this social issue. And she is unbelievable. And I've got some people that I'm going to be contacting here with me to see what we're going to be able to do. But it's not an isolated incident. We've got to get ahead of this. We don't want to be reacting all the time. Somebody's dead now, so we're having to take action. What if we would have took action? What if we would have been in a position to take action before this became an issue? What if we would have been actively involved in helping her find a place to stay, get him the help he needs? Because obviously he was dealing with some mental issues toward the end, and we don't know what led to him. But what if we could have been there for him? What if we could have heard the silent cries of another mother that was overwhelmed? That's the question I have. Look, I'm going to get off of here because we've got work to do, and I'll just leave it at that. Again, for those who want to support the work that we are doing, the links are going to be there in the description box. You can give by going to the site, or you can give by going to our Cash App account, and all that's in there. All I'll say is we've got work to do, and it's going to be up to you to decide, how you are going to be a part of the solution. But we can no longer sit back and depend on our enemies to do for us what we need to be doing for ourselves. On that note, I'm out.